Hi everyone, my name is Kaisar Abbas. I am a software developer and an automation engineer. I want to quickly introduce this channel and what sort of content you should expect, and a few things I want to mention regarding test automation in general. So I've worked on manual and automated testing for over 20 years now, and around 12 years in automation. I've had the pleasure of developing web apps, mobile apps, RESTful APIs on different platforms, including Azure, AWS, and VPS hosting. And I've done that for around 7 years. I think it's really important for test automation guys to have some experience in development on production environment, and that's why like a lot of content would involve development as well, and I would expect you guys to join me in that and do hands-on development as well. I love both development and automation, and when somebody asks me what I love the most out of the two, it's really difficult to choose one. I just like them both. A few important things which I do want to mention. One is test automation does not replace manual testing. It complements it. So it is basically automated checks of what was working previously is still working as expected. However, it is necessary to have good automation in place in order for the team to stay agile and not introduce any unexpected bugs. I've seen many teams start with UI automation and try to cover business logic, and even worse than that, see it as, try to make up for the lack of unit tests and integration tests. That's a very wrong and dangerous approach. This is what gets you into a mess, and which is difficult to get out of. You should try to achieve overall coverage as a whole system, or and have automated tests at different levels. For example, unit tests, integration tests, API tests, UI tests, etc. Another thing is the testing of business logic in UI tests should be avoided at all costs. The UI tests are basically the most difficult ones to maintain. Even a slight change in UI can break the UI test. So you want to have the UI test to be really minimal. Only have the actions that user might take while using your app, like clicking buttons, drag and drop, select options, entering input values, and submitting forms. Having everything automated through UI test is you're asking for trouble. So please avoid it. Majority of the tests should be covered through UI tests. You must be aware of the test pyramid. I won't go into detail here, but definitely most of the tests should be covered through unit tests. This is because they sit closest to the developer. They give the fastest feedback to the developer. This is very important factor for a healthy code base as well. The faster the developer knows about defects, the easier it is to fix them. This is mainly because they are either currently working on that part of code or they have recently worked on it. Plus, the unit tests make it easier to debug and troubleshoot the issues. And if you can do test-driven development, there's nothing like it. It's even better. So that's because it'll ensure your system is well designed and future-proof. We'll cover some test-driven development in some of the videos, so we'll go about into detail there. Most of the apps nowadays involve some sort of REST API as well. There needs to be a very strong emphasis on testing these RESTful APIs. I've seen many teams ignore it and not have API tests. I believe it should make a major portion of overall test coverage. In my opinion, API tests are the easiest type of test to automate, and these APIs also play a really important role of a backbone to your whole system. They're consumed by websites, web apps, mobile apps, TV apps, all sorts of apps. So there's no reason you should ignore it. Um, I'll be doing multiple videos on different types of different ways you can test the APIs and also automate the API testing. Uh, I remember like one of the organizations I worked at had 5 APIs, and none of them had API automation in place when I joined the team. They had several UI automation repositories and frameworks, but not surprisingly, most of them were switched off, mainly because of lack of resources, to fix the issues. And this brings me to another important point. Most organizations you work with will lack automation resources, mainly because funding and resourcing for development activities always takes priority. This is why it's very important to do smart automation, not just write a bunch of scripts, which are difficult to maintain. What I mean is, automation code base should be easy to maintain, easy to troubleshoot, easy to debug and fix issues. Another thing is that good coding practices should be used, and coding practices are uh, and conventions for test automation are slightly different from that of regular app development. I'll try to cover these practices in separate video. And, yeah, but I always recommend automation testers to get at least some development experience on a production app. This is one thing I really see missing in most automation testers, and a major reason for having difficult to maintain automation frameworks. They're just not well designed. I spent more than 7 years actively working on development of web apps, mobile apps, RESTful APIs. This has helped me a lot in writing good, robust frameworks, frameworks that are easy to maintain and enhance. I'm not suggesting you spend 7 years on development, but at least have some experience. And it goes both ways. I've seen developers write unit tests that don't test much. Developers should be also working with the testers to learn how to write good tests that really matter. Uh, but that's for a separate video. We'll discuss it. Anyways, I'll go into detail in separate videos on most of the important stuff, but here I want to just mention what sort of major content will be. So I've done automation using different languages and frameworks, including Python, Swift, Ruby, C Sharp, JavaScript, and Java. And I'll try to cover some videos on all these languages and different frameworks, different languages. But most of the content will be in JavaScript, especially Node.js. This is because I found Node.js to be best for rapid development. Although as a language, I like Python and C Sharp and Swift better, but for rapid development, there's nothing like Node.js. However, like most concepts discussed in the videos will apply to other languages as well. Another thing is JavaScript. It could be intimidating at first, especially if you're coming from other languages. Hopefully, I'll be able to make it as much fun for you guys as it is for me. In my experience, a big problem with many test automation developers is that people start with automation without fully understanding the language they're using. This is very dangerous again. Imagine building a house without having a good working knowledge of tools you're using. This is especially true with JavaScript, and that's because on one hand, JavaScript is really easy to work with because of its easy syntax, dynamic type system, and ease of setup. But at the same time, working with JavaScript, especially troubleshooting issues, can be daunting if you're not familiar with language well, and because of its asynchronous nature. Uh, we really want to learn these two, and once you do, it's really fun to work with. It's really easy, and rapid development is achievable with Node.js. And since we will be using Node.js for most of the tutorials, and JavaScript, I want to cover basics of JavaScript very quickly. I'll try to keep it as short as possible. So we'll do that in the first series of videos. I won't be covering JavaScript in depth, since there's plenty of learning resources on JavaScript. But I will cover the basics, especially the things you should know for test automation and the things you should watch out for. Okay, so be sure to subscribe to my channel so you get notified of the future videos. I'll also be doing some live videos so you can ask questions and also see how I troubleshoot if I face any issues. Right. See you all in the JavaScript sessions.